Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode. Today's guest is Kendall Platt, horticultural therapist at Adventures with Flowers, who helps women turn their outdoor spaces into calming, joy-filled retreats. She's all about quietening the mind, reconnecting with yourself, and using gardening as a powerful antidote to burnout. If you're craving more peace, presence, and time for you, this episode is for you. So welcome, Kendall.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I'm really excited about our conversation and loving your backdrop. For anyone who's watching this on video, you will see the beautiful backdrop in Kendall's garden. So much to ask you. And as someone who's married to a gardener as well, I'm very interested in plants and flowers and obviously the therapeutic side of it too, and how just seeing my husband's transformation over the years and how different he is. I'm sure that you notice this in your clients. So I'm going to start by asking you, how did you get into the work that you do? And yeah, what's your mission?
Yeah, so I used to work as a forensic scientist for years.
Oh, wow.
So I would examine like clothing and weapons for blood, other body fluids, which I found really fascinating. But it was quite an assault on the nervous system, as you can
Mm,
imagine.
yeah.
A lot of like urgent work, um, a lot of, seeing quite horrible things that happen, reading a lot of sort of case circumstances because you need to understand what's going on in the case to inform like what you're going to look for when you're searching, a t-shirt, for example. So you end up being exposed to like quite a lot of nasty stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and whilst I was doing that job, I moved into this house that I still live in now, and it had a garden. And at that time, I was very much in this state of, work, work, work all the time, do really good at work. I'll prove myself. I'll get the promotion. That classic like type A thing of the harder I work, the more successful I'm going to be, which actually I think we can probably all accept is actually bollocks.
Yeah.
Because, living as a woman in a patriarchy, that's kind of the con, isn't it? Like, oh, keep proving yourself, we'll keep taking, and then
Yeah.
actually you won't get rewarded. So I'd very much fallen into that trap. I was working all the hours, and then when I moved into this house and it had a garden, I was like, oh well, I better add doing the garden to my to-do list. In a bit of a like, oh, I really wanted outdoor space because I knew I had this affinity with nature, but I was like, oh, faff, I'm going to have to do that.
Yeah.
So I started doing the garden, and I very quickly realized that actually the only time my brain was quiet was when I was gardening.
Mm,
And it kind of became a bit of an obsession because I was like, oh, wow, my brain is quiet probably for the first time in my life. Um, and so I just wanted to do it more and more and more. I was working these crazy weeks, like seeing all this horrible stuff. And then, of an evening, I'd get home from work and I'd just go out into the garden and kind of just let my mind sort of quiet, let all of the kind of stuff in my head like get out of there, into my body and let it kind of move through my body to try and get it out of my head because it was just feeling like so crammed with stuff.
mm,
So that was it really. I just kind of it wasn't that I thought, oh, I need to learn to garden because it's good for me. It was very much like a practical thing. But over time, I the time that I had to garden got less, especially once I had children. And I started to kind of unofficially, I guess, come up with these what I called mindful gardening activities. So it was very much about engaging your senses, and really trying to feel my feelings because I don't know about your listeners, but I would imagine if they're women, then or anyone really living in our society now, we're not really encouraged to feel our feelings. And I certainly hadn't been. So for years, I'd just been anything, something bad happened, I would just kind of cram it down, like shut it inside my body and try and make it go away. And for me, that, manifested in a lot of anxiety, a lot of very overwhelmed, very busy mind, not sleeping very well, having digestive issues. And it was really that once I was in the garden and I was kind of allowed, enabling like, that cork to slightly lift out of the bottle a little bit and allow some of those feelings to come up and out, and let them move through my body and get out of me. that was, really, really powerful for me. And I started to process, things that had happened to me um, since I was a kid, and actually finally acknowledge them and say to myself, yeah, do you know what? That was a really hard situation that you went through when you were young, and you didn't have, the emotional support because for whatever reason.
Mm.
But my garden started to kind of provide that support for me to allow me to kind of work my way through it. So yeah, so I basically started to do that for myself, and then I had my first daughter, and I had this like crazy. I gave birth to her, and I was very lucky. I had a very positive birth experience. And once I'd given birth, and that kind of euphoria comes over you, I just had this like mad like thing inside me. It was almost like I talk about, like a lioness inside of me that was like, you have got to change the world for her. Like, you things have got to change. Like, she can't repeat the cycle that you have from your mum and probably her mum, and from centuries of women, this constant overworking to prove yourself, not feeling your feelings, just on that treadmill going through life, like not really feeling the good feelings because you're too scared to feel the good feelings, because you kind of have to feel the bad with the good.
Mm.
And I was like, I've got to do something to make a change here. And I also thought to myself, there must be loads of other women out there who are feeling the same as me. So I really want to be able to bring this to them. So I started with what I knew, actually, which when I was at university, I'd worked as on a flower stall in Bath. Actually, I went to uni
Nice.
there. That was like my Saturday job.
Yeah.
And so I'd obviously always been, drawn to nature and the garden and flowers and colors. And yeah, so I started with mindful Christmas wreath making, because it was
Mm.
coming up to Christmas. My daughter was born in the June, and it was coming up to Christmas. And I was thinking, well, I can easily teach people to make wreaths. I used to spend hours doing that. But I really want to kind of bring in this mindfulness element to it. So that's what I started with. And I still run those year on year. They're always really well attended. We have a really nice time. It's like small groups. And in those sessions, I started to notice that, women that didn't know each other, that didn't know me, were bringing really big stuff to the table, while they're there kind of creating with their hands. Like, big topics of conversation were coming up. And I was thinking to myself, I've really got something here. Like, this women creating and being side by side in nature is really powerful. So it kind of moved on from there. I then started a mindful gardening subscription box,
Mm.
and that kind of hit around COVID time. So I wasn't able to do any more of my in-person workshops, but I kind of focused on this subscription box. And all of those, so they would receive a box, and in there was a mindful gardening activity, and either some bulbs or some seeds, or
Oh,
a
nice.
plant. So they would have instructions on how to kind of do the activity to help
Yeah.
them release those feelings, to help them quiet their minds, and grow the plants in a way that was the plants were gonna thrive as
Yeah.
well. And so I did that for a little bit, but after a while I realized actually that the thing that I loved doing was the teaching element. It wasn't the like the packing of the boxes. That was not appealing to me at all, really. So it was at that point that I stopped doing the boxes, but started a membership,
Okay.
and started working one-to-one with people as well. So yeah, so I still do that model now. I have like a group membership, and then I have one-to-one services as well, which is more directed, and I would say more impactful for most people, because you can get to the crux of the issues that you're having, and obviously it's bespoke to your own garden, whereas the
Yeah.
group membership is more kind of generic advice that you're still going to get loads out of, but it's not going to be tailored to your garden. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then it got to a stage where I was like, well, I'm kind of doing this thing. I feel like I need to do some qualifications. So I did a course at Thrive, which is gardening for well-being charity, actually based not too far from me here in Reading.
Mm.
And so I went and did a course with them, and I'll be honest, I don't think I really learned that much, but for me it was about having that kind of backup that I knew what I was talking about type thing.
Yeah,
So and we all like to have a certificate, don't we? um
exactly.
so yeah, so that was it really, and then it's just kind of gone from there. And in that time I've had a second baby, which my garden has helped me through, because well, I know you've got two little ones. Having a second is like a whole nother ball game from just having
Mm.
one, or it was in my experience
Yeah,
anyway.
absolutely.
So yeah, so it's just kind of grown from there really. And a bit of a roundabout way, but really just started as something I felt I should be doing, and then actually became, life changing, really. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
so nice. I love it. I love hearing stories from guests on this podcast of how something is like birthed into life, but it's come
Mm,
from either, yeah, like a sort of little idea or a big idea or a passion project, or like in my case, it sort of came from learning about generational cycles and then myself burning out. So we've actually got a bit of a crossover with both of our businesses because,
mm,
you're helping people who are either burnt out or kind of on the brink of burnout, and yeah, like in that kind of therapeutic mindset of getting them to, yeah, feel mindful again and feel healthy and mentally well. And yeah, I'm doing similar things but in a different kind of way, and I just
mm,
love the whole nature element, because there's that, like that's what our ancestors would have been doing, isn't it? Like, and also like when you mentioned it's almost like a sisterhood bit, like the wreath making, I was just thinking as you would, I was imagining like women around a big table, and it's almost like that sisterhood that we would have had all those years ago when we were doing those things with our hands, on the land or back in the cave or wherever. And
mm.
that's just like kind of how what we were built for. And our nervous
Yeah.
systems were not built to sit at a computer screen all day long or to be, yeah, just in this stressful modern world. And so I just love the sound of what you do. So it's a bit like therapy and mindfulness, but also um, getting your garden fixed up as well. Like it's a bit,
Yeah,
it's like a
exactly.
win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think it is in the way that it's therapy. It's like it is digging in your garden. The mindfulness element I bring in is because so many of my clients, their brains are so busy
Mm,
when they start working with me, and they've got so much sort of stored emotion in their bodies, that actually they feel very overwhelmed. So I bring the mindfulness element in because it really helps them to stay in the present moment. So we work a lot on engaging senses to start with, and we're
mm,
very intentional about that. But over time, like now, when I go out into my garden, and when clients that I've worked with for, one of my packages is a year long. And the reason for that is, I think it's hard to ingrain a healthy habit in a couple of months. I just
yeah,
don't think that really happens.
I
And
agree.
also, my big ethos is getting people to garden all year round. So even in the winter, for two reasons. One, it takes the pressure off in the spring and summer when everything's growing, if you've got some of the kind of garden activities done over the winter. But also, in the winter, not enough of us are getting enough daylight as it
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
So if you work from home and you can get out on your lunch break in the winter, even if it's cold, and you can be out there for 10 minutes, like it's getting off of that screen, like you were just saying, and getting into our natural state, our natural habitat, how we should have, how we were made to be. And if not, I say to my clients, if you work out of the house 5 days a week, then you can of course do that on the weekend, but do try and make sure you do it, because otherwise you could go for months. Like a lot of kind of traditional gardening people like talk about putting the garden to bed for the winter. And I'm like, well, actually no, I really disagree with that, because I think you're then cutting off those crucial times out in nature at a time where potentially your mood is low,
Mm,
because there's not as many hours of daylight, the weather's not as good, da, 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 da. So yeah, so I think that that's kind of where the mindfulness side comes in, and the year-round gardening. And then therapeutic wise is, you I mean, you probably wouldn't be surprised, but some of the stuff, like I was saying, that comes up for people is really big. So for me, I'm very clear with my clients, depending on what comes up for them, there of course will be things where I'm like having to signpost to other, maybe some talking therapies or somebody like yourself, because there are things that, I'm not trained to deal with. I'm trained to almost start the process, like start that unlocking in
Yeah,
the garden. And then when bigger things come up, of course I'm there as a listening ear, but I certainly can't direct people through that. So we can absolutely still continue to work on the garden together, but I would always advise also getting some support from other therapeutic professionals. So
yeah,
I think it's important to have those boundaries as to what you are able to do. So I very much kind of view my role as like that, those first steps into into kind of taking that cork out, like I was saying, and slowly kind of allowing those emotions to come out. But also, a lot of my work is very somatic. So, I think for many of us, we're too up in our own heads.
yeah,
I've also got ADHD, so that kind of interplays with that as well, as well as being a busy mom, juggling the household work, all of those things. So now when I get out into my garden, my body just knows that it's time to kind of empty the head into the body and do something, some movement in the garden to get those thoughts and feelings out of my body. And I think many women don't know how to do that. So
yeah,
it's really a lovely place to start, and it feels natural to be in the garden. It
yeah,
feels like my garden for me feels like a hug when I walk out into it. It feels like a really safe space, and
yeah,
that's ultimately what I want to help my clients create, is to create a space that they can use as a therapeutic space for themselves for years, if that's what they choose to do, like long after we finished working together. So
mm.
yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that because they're essentially creating something that they can not only like they have the memories of the fact that they've worked hard with you in a mindful way and almost I guess they would have the memories of working their own land, nurturing, essentially creating like plants that are thriving and that you see them year on year kind of coming through again and even stronger and even bigger and more established.
Mm,
But they're probably going to be coming out like, after months or years and thinking, this is so rewarding because I've created this myself. And that sense of reward and satisfaction must be really lovely.
yeah.
But yeah, and also just thinking about the way you work, it's lovely to be able to talk to someone and to get everything out of your mind and empty those thoughts or I don't know, traumas and like the heavier kind of thoughts and
Mm,
feelings that might have been suppressed, in a way where you don't have to make eye contact because sometimes they say, don't they, it's quite hard to, I'm sure maybe this was something you learned in Thrive, but
mm.
it's quite hard to sometimes sit in a therapy room doing CBT, like making eye contact with a therapist. And some people don't, that's not right for them. Some people that's great. Some people really, yeah, that's quite hard to do. So yeah, like this is why I love the sound of like walk and talk therapies and this and the
Yeah.
gardening. And yeah, I have to say, like my husband, during the pandemic, completely, he went from working as like managing a team in an office to doing an apprenticeship with as a 40-year-old man, he was like doing an apprenticeship with a bunch of kind of 16, 17 year olds
Mm.
at Spa College, which is like horticultural,
Yeah. My
where,
auntie went my auntie went there actually. Yeah,
oh
God,
really?
however many years ago, like 40 years ago or something. Yeah. So no, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the place to go to learn to garden and loved it. Did that for a couple of years, I think the course was. And I have to say, he mentally is a completely different person. He used to get so stressed. He used to, in fact, was working in Reading. So he, getting the train from Woking to Reading, he'd come home when we had our first baby at home. And I remember life being very hard because simply for the fact that he was not happy and I
Mm,
would say probably a bit depressed. But since he's become a gardener, he's a different person. Like for him, I genuinely think that's been like a therapy. And he comes home from work, gardening all day long, and goes straight in the garden.
mm,
And he's created this beautiful sanctuary, which I can see you've created with yours just by looking at your background there. And it's beautiful because everyone gets to enjoy it. And selfishly, I'm like, I miss it because I used to be the gardener of the family before we had kids. I used to love getting my hands in the earth,
Yeah.
and I just don't get a chance to do it anymore because he is so obsessed and loves it so much. And
Well,
so I,
you need to reclaim a bit
yeah,
of it for yourself. Be like, no, this is my section. I get to do what I want, you
I
know?
should. Yeah, I really should because we've only got a small garden, but it's amazing what you can do with a small space when you've got the knowledge and when you know like the soil and the earth and you've kind of got that experience and expertise.
Mm,
But yeah, it's such a lovely thing, isn't it? Like,
yeah. And I think another big thing for a lot of my clients is having the space to talk about the society that we exist in. Like it's still, I like to think that we're progressing, but actually, I think, at the minute, it seems like we're kind of going backwards. Like, you know, there's our conditioning that we've been brought up with, this kind of constant work, work, work that I alluded to, this constant feeling guilty when we, take 10 minutes to go in the garden and do something for ourselves. So, a lot of my work is unpicking a lot of that conditioning and empowering and giving the women that I'm working with the confidence to be able to be like, do you know what, the washing can wait. It's important that I feel good because
mm,
actually, like you say, and you said about with your husband, when you feel happy and healthy, everyone else around you is happier and healthier.
yeah,
So, I shared a story earlier this week on my Instagram about how, for a really long time, I had a lot of judgment from, loved ones, like really close family members, friends, people on the internet about the fact that I would kind of advocate for women taking time for themselves in the garden and prioritizing myself, because I think a lot of certainly older generations feel like, oh, well, when you have a child, they must be the priority and you can't possibly like do anything for yourself. And that was really hard to kind of stay strong in that time. And I suppose that's why I offer the service that I do, because I know it can be hard to stay strong and keep going with looking after yourself. So that's why I'm there to be like, come on, you can do this. And that kind of almost support and accountability. But one day my daughter had been she'd been like doing a dance for me. You know how they do, they're like, oh, let me do a show or whatever, or maybe yours don't, I don't
no,
know,
they
do your
do.
boys
Yeah,
do that? Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, they're like, let me do a show. So she'd like been doing this dance routine for me, and then she was probably only about 5, and then at the end she kind of sat down and she said, oh, I just need 10 minutes to rest, mummy. And I thought
Oh,
to myself,
cute.
that is why I have done what I've done, and I've
Yeah,
shown her that it's important to take time to rest, to look after yourself. And I
yeah,
thought to myself, it's been worth it. It's been worth all of that, like backbiting and bitching behind my back, because actually, all that really matters is that I'm happy and healthy. My husband and the kids are happy and healthy. And if people want to slag me off for prioritizing me and my family, go ahead.
yeah,
Like I've got to look after myself first, because if I don't look after myself, then everything falls to shit. I mean, I
yeah,
think that's probably true in the large majority of households in the UK. Like, if the parents are not happy and thriving, it's the kids are also going to be struggling to be happy and thriving. So it really is important that we do start to allow ourselves to feel all of those feelings. And it's scary, isn't it? Like you said, about some sitting opposite somebody, looking them in the eyes and unearthing all your biggest fears and challenging emotions. So I think that is why the garden is so impactful, because like you say, you're side by side, you're actually focusing on the task that you're doing, and that then just allows the words to flow. So yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and you've talked about the patriarchal conditioning, which I also talk about quite a lot in
Mm,
with my clients and in my social media and stuff, because it's really hard to unpack that and to also just have the awareness that that is what is driving you.
mm,
And that's why I do like, using the hypnotherapy to really get to the root of it and rewire it, because the amount of decisions that I think women make a day that are unconsciously driven by that conditioning and, the people pleasing and the like finding it hard to set boundaries and not being able to say no and all of that stuff. Yeah, it's such an eye opener when you start to go on this journey and realize, oh, okay. Turns out I was burnt out for years, or I was running off stress, which was that was my experience. A couple of
mm,
years ago, I found myself crying to the GP, and it was because I couldn't say no to things, and I just literally driven myself to the ground and didn't ask for any help. I could have done with you actually at the time, but but yeah, undoing all of that is hard work, but so worth it. And yeah, I'm not afraid to say to my kids of a weekend when I feel overstimulated because I'm quite sensitive.
Mm.
And when things get too much or I'm tired, I'll say to them, like on Sunday, I said, boys, I'm just going to get in bed for a bit and just have a rest. And I'm just like, how freeing is it to be able to sit in bed for 20 minutes and, have like drift off for probably a few minutes of that. And
Mm.
for them to know it's okay. Like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
just burn myself to the ground anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message. Like I my daughter goes to the local school and they set this homework and I'm kind of like quite lax about the homework because
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
like, do you know what? She's concentrated all day at school. I actually think it's a really bad message that we're
Yeah,
teaching our kids that you come home from school and then you continue to work.
yeah,
Is it any wonder that in the pandemic people were just working 24/7? No, because there was no boundary, there was no cutoff, there was nothing to stop you from going, work is over now. So
yeah,
I do the times tables and that sort of stuff, but with her, but I kind of really, when they're like, oh, if you fancy doing this extra project over the Easter holidays, I'm like, absolutely not, because I want to. It's very easy, isn't it, to say to our children, oh, you must look after yourself, you must rest, whilst working like an absolute dog.
yeah,
But kids are not going to listen to that. They're going to see what you're doing and copy what you're doing, which is exactly what, I did, and I'm sure my mum did, and previous generations. So it really is our responsibility if we want our kids to stay mentally well, um, to show them that rest is important, that taking time for ourselves is important, that prioritizing our well-being and our health really is important, because if we show them, then they're more likely to actually copy what we do. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all in the modeling, isn't it? They
Yeah.
just copy and they don't just do as we say, they do as we do. Just what you were saying there about the homework, I don't ever encourage mine to. I basically say, do you want to do this? And my eldest is now, he actually does enjoy some of the homework he gets set, but genuinely, I never force them or push them to do it for those exact reasons that you just mentioned. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to be conditioning my children to think that they need to do 6 hours of work sitting down at a desk at school all day and then do more when they get home. Like, no,
Yeah.
thank you. We're going to spend time together as a family and connect. And my youngest loves getting in the garden actually, and that's what we're doing in these summer months. We're spending time outside because they want
Mm.
to run around and move. So yeah, I couldn't agree more about that. Um, do you go to people's homes or do people come to you?
So the wreath courses, people come to me just because I've got all the materials that I've grown in my garden and dried. But
Mm,
the gardening sessions, I go to people because my belief is that it's about creating that connection with your own garden,
mm,
which is another reason why I advocate for people actually being involved. I'm not a garden designer. I don't come and do it all for you. Like, we do it together. You can lean on me for support. You can ask me questions and I'll teach you everything I know about the garden design elements. But ultimately, I want you to be making the final decisions about plant choices, colors, all of those kind of things. So yeah, so I travel to people because it's all about their garden. It's about creating, like I said earlier, it's about creating that therapy space for them. So generally, horticultural therapists work in therapeutic gardens,
mm.
which are like centrally located. There's a few of them in Reading, and then I'm sure there will be some in like everybody's local towns that's listening. But very often their sessions are right in the middle of the day, which for working mothers, probably not that useful
Yeah,
because they're busy working. They tend to be like 2-hour sessions, and you can get referred to them by your GP. Some of them now, I think, are doing sessions where you can pay to go along.
mm.
But they are in a therapeutic garden. It's not growing that relationship with your own garden, which is really what's key for me personally.
Mm.
I think that that's really important, to have that relationship with your own outdoor space. And who's got kind of 3 hours in the middle of the day to go and actually do it. So I guess the way that I work, and the way I'm probably, I think I'm unique in doing so, is that I come to you and I teach you all the things, all the things for that session. I tend to, I either do like hour sessions every month, and then you get support in between, or I come and we'll do a whole day in your garden and like
Mm,
completely transform like one area. So we'll do a whole border, for example. So
lovely.
there's a couple of different ways that I work, but yeah, it is about for you to develop that relationship with your garden. And I think ultimately the I want you to feel really confident in what you're doing. And if you're kind of sowing seeds that are going to, and I want you to feel connected, if you're sowing seeds that are going into a therapeutic garden, you don't really have that connection with them like you would in your own space. You don't have that ability to like check in with them every day and grow that connection. And, because I recognize that so many of my clients are so busy, my mindful gardening activities, some of them are just 5 minutes long. So
Mm,
you can get up in the morning and while the kids are eating their breakfast, get out into the garden and do 5 minutes,
yeah.
or once they're in bed, you can put them down and then get out there and do 20 minutes of weeding, or, I have a technique that I call rage weeding, which is, as you can imagine, all about feeling the anger and getting out of your body. Gosh, some days I definitely need to lean on that. But because they're short and they can fit into little gaps throughout the day, you don't need to find that like 3 hour time slot, and you certainly don't need to like wait for hours and hours on the weekend. So for me, it's very much about getting people in nature every day, even if it's
Mm.
just for 5 minutes. And when I say every day, I don't mean like you are allowed a day off, but little and often, I guess, is what I'm saying, because actually all the research shows that when you get out there and you garden a little bit every day, your well-being scores hugely increase and your stress levels lower.
Mm.
So, and it's about kind of keeping those stores topped up. If you imagine that generally you're kind of existing on like a level 3 day to day, and then something bad happens, you're dipping right down to a 1. That's really challenging to manage. But if your kind of mood and your well-being are at like a 6, because every day you're going out and kind of keeping them topped up, so even though there may be little dips every now and again because something happens, you're keeping that store topped up back up to a 6, and then something happens, you're only dipping down to a 4, say, for example. So it
Mm.
just makes life seem so much more manageable,
Mm.
um, because you are, regularly getting that time for yourself and topping up, the kind of the happiness levels and all of the things, all of the benefits that you're getting from being outside. And just even being outside in the fresh air, I always sleep so much better if I've spent even 10 minutes in the garden,
Yeah.
because I've got out, I've connected with nature, I've had some fresh air in my lungs, I haven't just been glued to the screen all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so, so needed. I always start my day with a morning walk where I go listen to the birds and I'm in fresh air. And I sometimes, like this time of year, I'll, because it's quite quiet in the kind of fields where I live. And
Mm.
sometimes I'll take my shoes off and do some grounding as well, just to really connect to the
Yeah,
earth.
lovely.
But yeah, and throughout the day, I do that. I have to say, like, I know it's a luxury for people who perhaps don't work from home. But yeah, I do tend to go out in the garden for maybe 4 or 5 times a day just to spend a few minutes out there and listening to the bees and watching them go into like the petals of the flowers. And
Mm.
I've got an egg chair out there now, which I and I
Oh, I'm jealous. I really want one.
oh, I got it last year for my 40th, and it was like the best thing, the best gift to ask for, because I sit in there and I'll just watch. Like this time of year is nothing nicer than just listening to the birds, watching the bees, and yeah, just literally being with nature without my phone and enjoying it, and
Yeah.
so nice and so grounding. Um, yeah, I love it. I just think it's so needed in this kind of busy world. So I
Yeah. So
love.
one of my big things I really want to kind of do more of this year is, because I recognize that not everybody works from home, is I and it's a service I offer. I go into corporate companies and
Mm,
I do a session with the staff as like a team building exercise where we transform an outdoor space. So
mm.
we actually create them a therapeutic garden in the workplace if they've got outdoor space like a roof garden, or maybe they've got like an outdoor courtyard. And we create that there, and then I teach the staff members like things to do to keep it looking good, that they can go and actually do the activities on their lunch break, pull a few
Yeah.
weeds, whatever it is they might fancy. So because I recognize that, you know, that is quite often when where it's almost more needed is
Yes.
you know, in these kind of very sterile offices where there's not a lot of fresh air, that those horrible kind of strip lights, you know, it's very you know, we're not designed naturally to be in those environments. So if you then on your tea, you know, your tea break, or take a cup of tea out there, or go out on your lunch break and can pull a few weeds and just kind of really connect in with nature, so that is something that I want to do more of, because actually um, you know, I think for companies that really do value their staff's well-being, they can't get away from the fact that nature has to play a part in that. And if
Yeah.
they can provide that space for their staff, you know, their staff are only going to be happier, their staff are only going to be more productive, their staff are only going to be earning them more money. So from like a return on investment point of view, for the company, it's massive, because not only does it really signal to them that their company values them, but it's actually providing them a space where they can, you know, switch off from the stresses of corporate life, which, you know, you've been in, I've been in. Like we know what it's like, and it's you know, nature is hugely impactful. So
Yeah,
yeah, so
that's
if anyone listening works in corporate and they're like, do you know what? My company really bloody needs this, then get in touch and
yes.
let's get it set up. Let's get you out in the garden, even in your lunch break at work. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good. I was going to ask you actually about that because I did work for a company before I retrained and yeah, kind of changed tack with my career. I worked for a company that did have one of those buildings, like sterile and
Mm,
everything, but they did have a huge renovation to it. And they added like a living wall inside the building. But then if you
mm,
walked out onto the balcony, they did have a load of, and it wasn't, you couldn't really call it a garden, but they did genuinely kind of try to invest and make it look beautiful with like pots. And they had, I think they had invested in like a beekeeper, and they were like
oh
doing these like
wow.
trips. They were inviting the staff possibly once a week, maybe once a month, and this beekeeper would come in and they would like educate them on that. And so they did start. I could, yeah, that was a good kind of 6 or 7 years ago now. But I remember thinking this is really cool, and this is a great
Yeah.
way to get the employees
Yeah.
involved with a bit of nature and in
I
your.
got the idea because I was having coffee with a friend, and there was like a big planter behind her, and there was like this really spiky plant that just like kept on spiking her. She was like, "Oh, this is so horrible. Like, why is this plant here?" And I was like, "Do you know what?" I was like, so many corporate, you know, but what they might do like an outdoor space and pots and stuff, but they tend to choose plants that are hard wearing,
Yeah.
understandably so,
Mm.
but they're not very sensory friendly. They're
Yeah.
actually, you know, quite spiky and not very pleasant to touch. So it doesn't really make you want to interact with them.
Yeah.
So I guess the benefit of my package is that yes, the plants are going to be sensory, which does mean they will need watering and maybe a little bit more care. But by actually you know, giving the tools and the techniques to the staff members, um, they're going to know how to do that, and also they can access, you know, a little bit of well-being for themselves every day if they choose to. So
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
love that. Yeah, I think that's a great idea for you. Yeah, fantastic. So do you have anything at the moment that you're working on that would specifically benefit the listeners or that you're promoting at the moment?
Yeah, so my it's my garden glow up service, which I spoke about a little bit earlier. It's basically I come to your garden wherever you are based in the UK, and I come to the garden. We assess, we choose one area that we're going to focus on. So it might be that you want to, you know, redesign a border, for example. So you know, you can. I'll get you to send me a few photos before and give me some ideas of what you want to do, and then I'll come to the garden, see it in the flesh. We'll come up with ideas together. Then we will head off to the garden centre. I'll come to the garden centre with you because I know a lot of my clients find the garden centre really overwhelming. They kind of go in, do a bit of a like supermarket sweep style dash because they just get really overwhelmed and just shove loads of stuff in. And then when they put it in the border, they then like go, oh, it doesn't look like that nice cohesive, you know, beautiful look that I was after. So you know, I'll teach you all the tricks of the trade and exactly how to shop for plants that are going to do well in your garden, that are going to give you the look that you want, and that you're going to know how to maintain. Then we'll go and get a nice lunch somewhere, because girls got to eat.
Yeah.
All that's obviously on me, the lunch, and then we'll spend the afternoon in the garden actually planting up the border, and then I'll make sure that you know exactly what you're going to need to do in each season for the plants that we've planted. So
Oh,
yeah,
lovely.
so you'll know exactly kind of what you're doing with that border for for the future, so you can get out there and interact with it daily if you want to, and get your well-being fixed.
That sounds like such a lovely day as well. Like,
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah,
sort of,
I think I kind of designed it like it is, it's going to get you a nice garden. It's going to get you out there, start taking the action there with somebody alongside of you so you can feel confident. But also, I just think it's something that's lovely to do for yourself that really sort of signifies to you that you're worth it. I think
yeah.
there's, so often in this world, women feel guilty to treat themselves to a nice day.
Mm.
But actually, you're going to benefit from that. Your family ongoing is going to benefit because you're going to be in a nicer mood because you're out in that garden. They're also going to get that beautiful border that you've designed,
Mm.
and to be able to interact with that, which hope would will design it so it encourages lots of wildlife into the garden. Because I'm very much about including wildlife, because I think when you encourage wildlife into your garden, it helps you feel more connected to the living world. If you, like you were saying about sitting and watching the bees, or the
Mm.
ladybirds sort of eating the aphids, or whatever elements there are in your garden. So I think not enough of us treat ourselves on the regular.
Mm.
And so I really wanted to create something that felt like a real treat, because I think it's really important to show ourselves that we're worth that time and that effort and that money, you
Yeah,
know?
definitely. That sounds like such a nice day. And I think because you've got everything there, you've got like you're learning about something new. You're almost like having a chat with a mate because, spending the day with you and having lunch, like that's sort of like something you do with a mate. But then you've also got the opportunity to open up and yeah, kind of pour out your heart if you feel called to do so. And so yeah,
Yeah.
I think everything about that sounds wonderful.
And you get a lovely garden, or a lovely border at the end to boot. So
Of course,
yeah,
yeah.
and for some people, if you're in a small garden, a lot of people say to me, oh, but my garden's really tiny, and I'm like, oh well, props for you, you don't need a full year, then we can come and do it in a day. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people with small gardens just think, oh, my garden's really small, so there's no point. And it's like, actually, you can have such impact in a small garden if you value nature and you value um having that connection with it. Just because
Mm,
you've got a small space doesn't mean that you can't make it beautiful,
yeah.
and have plants in there that will improve your well-being, and so you can go out there and tend to it. So yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah, like I said earlier, we've got a small garden and I cannot believe what my husband has done with it because yeah, and like you said about like the eco sort of side of it and thinking about the environment and creating a small ecosystem is so important because we've got a very small pond, but it's almost like a washing up bowl size
Mm,
pond. And, Adam was like, but this is important because if you've got a water source, we can bring in frogs. Since we put it in, the frogs have arrived.
mm,
And the kids are fascinated because every year they're like, oh, frog spawns come again. And, they're always like, where's it come from? And
yeah.
but then that means that, the frogs are getting all the I don't know, do they get the aphids? I don't know what they get. I need to learn more about
Slugs.
it.
They like the
Slugs, that's
slugs,
it. So
yeah.
they're getting the slugs.
Yeah.
Means that our lettuce and the food that we're growing isn't getting, attacked as much as it would do. And, you don't need to use all those horrible, toxic, harsh chemicals to kill things off if you have a mini ecosystem. And that's what
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it, but like me and Adam are often talking to friends about that sort of thing because you're like, you can do it. We've proved you can do it in a small space. And yeah.
Absolutely. And do you know what? From a mental health and well-being point of view, we have got a loneliness epidemic in this country. People are increasingly living more solitary lives. Especially for myself as like a new mum, I was so lonely. I didn't really know anyone in this village, and my garden was like a friend to me. I know that sounds a bit like weird and a bit like
No, not at
creepy,
all.
but like when I could go outside and see other living things around me, it made me feel a little less lonely.
Yeah.
Um, so, I think as much as you can encourage the wildlife into your garden, they're gonna kind of be there to like be your support. I know you can't really chat to them. I mean, God, you could if you wanted.
I do.
Sometimes I do chat. Sometimes I do chat to my plants, but the birds I definitely chat to.
Yeah, I do.
And if I saw a frog, so I think. I think there's real power there to feel less lonely if you can encourage as much wildlife into your garden as possible. And
Definitely.
when you're more proud of your garden, you're more likely to want to invite your friends round for a cup of tea in the afternoon. You're not thinking, oh shit, like the garden looks awful. There's just kids' toys everywhere and dying plants. You're like, yeah, I know my garden looks fucking fantastic. And I'm really proud of myself for creating it. And I want to show it off to my friends. And it's not about that. It's not about showing it off to your friends. But if you are not inviting your friends round to your house and doing yourself out of connection
Yeah.
because you're worried and embarrassed and feeling guilty about your garden, then let's get your garden sorted so you don't need to feel like that anymore. So you can think, well, yeah, I know my garden's nice. So I can invite my friends around and have that lovely, deep and meaningful chats with them in the garden. Because
Yeah.
I think like once you create that like space that feels safe and secure to you, then when your friends come round, you are more at home, you are more comfortable in your skin, you are more able to really be yourself and forge those genuine deep connections with other people, which I think are so important, and I think not enough of us have. I have probably I don't have loads of like really deep friendships, but the ones I have are really, really special to me.
Mm.
I have a lot of acquaintances of people I say on the school run, oh hi, how are you? And it's very surface level, which is great. But I do have a few friends who I really love to hear all about their lives, and I love to talk to them about my struggles and my life. And I think, it's really important to have that as women, especially if we move away from family, which many of
Yeah.
us do. We probably don't really want to chat to our work colleagues too much about like big personal things, but I think if you can make that garden a really kind of safe, lovely, warm space that you want to be in and you're comfortable in, it will help you to yeah, improve those relationships and those connections with friends. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I keep saying actually to my partner, well, let's get people round. Let's like, yeah, we're always having family barbecues pretty much every weekend, but I would like to get more friends round. So you've just
Yeah.
reminded me I'm
Yeah.
gonna, yeah, send some messages this week and invite them over because yeah, there's nothing nicer than having on a sort of British summer's day when, like this weather we've had recently, having
Mhm.
people around for that sense of community.
Yeah.
And, yeah, connection is just lovely, isn't it? So
Yeah. Exactly.
oh, wonderful. Kendall, the work you do is so like heartwarming and lovely. And it's just making me want to go and after this call, I'm literally going to go and enjoy my garden. It really makes you want to go and do
Yeah,
it.
me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and fascinating work that you do. Let the listeners know, where can people find you?
So I social media wise hang out on Instagram. My handle is Kendall Marie Platt. And then I have my newsletter over on a platform called Substack. And that is also where my gardening membership is hosted as well. And then for to work with me, my website is adventureswithflowers.com. So
Fabulous.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes. I follow your Instagram and I really love everything you share there. And it makes me just want to go to your garden and have a nosy because I'm a nosy bitch. So,
Well, funny you should say that. I am doing a headshot day and networking in my garden in a couple of weeks. So I'll send you the
ah,
details of that. So
yeah. Do you know what? I
yeah,
saw that. I did actually see that and thought,
yeah,
oh, I do need some new pictures done. So I will check that out.
yeah, I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be. I did it last year, and it was just such a beautiful day. Like all other business women, getting together, having a bit of cake, having a chat about life, about work, and then getting your pickies done at the same time. So yeah,
Yeah,
it
that
was
is
really
such a
good.
fab idea. Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Oh, well, thank you, Kendall. It's been really lovely to speak to you. And yeah, have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Thanks
Take
for having
care.
me.
Bye.
Bye.